Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 1, the beginning of discourse number 32, the middle of the beginning, which is the Masechta, the second Masechta. This is where Shavuos Ayin Gimel begins. We're up to page 246, the middle of chapter 127. The Frierdiker Rebbe sums up the beginning of this discourse that there's two Hamshachas, two transmissions, one Gvul, one Bli Gvul. And interesting that the Rebbe Rashab begins first with the Ein Sof, but he actually emphasizes and discusses more at length the Gvul. So that's why maybe the Frierdiker Rebbe reverses the order. And he says that there's true transmissions from the divine source, the divine infinite source. One is Gvul, it's a finite, defined, and that's captured in the Kav. The Kav literally means a line. Kav Chut, the line and the thread. It's a Kav of energy. So a Kav, by definition, has two sides to it. On one hand, it's energy. On the other hand, it's a narrow flow. So you right there see there that it has parameters. So as he puts it here, it's measured and defined by the parameters, tailored to the parameters of the world. And because according to the divine desire that he wanted to have 10 spheres, not 11, not 9, not 9, not 11, and specifically these spheres, so the instrument that he's using to create what he wants is therefore defined, measured and defined by that desire. So it's the desire in what he wants to create that defines that the Kav should have definition. Kiklol She'er is because of the worlds. This general energy is because of the worlds. If there was no desire for worlds, you wouldn't have this energy in the first place. So if you have the energy, it's only because of the desire. And since the desire is that there be structure, therefore the energy, which is only there in order to fulfill this desire, is a structured type of energy. That's essentially what he's saying. Where you see here, right here, two aspects. Because desire, it's God's desire, as we learned, desire is more Bli Gvul than Gvul. Desire is more of a emanation of God's will, as opposed to defined by something. But because the desire is the Bli Gvul desire of the divine is for something that's structured, so that in turn creates an energy that is itself structured. So there you got another paradox. That the Kav is a result of a divine infinite energy, but an infinite energy that wants a finite reality. And therefore this Medida, as he says, is an energy from its beginning of its transmission, from its root and its source. There's no place where the Kav has any non-defined nature. Because its whole existence is only for one reason. It's to fulfill God's will to have a structured existence. So therefore there's no such thing as, okay, on one level the Kav is Bli Gvul, has no parameters, and then suddenly it assumes parameters. From the outset, its whole purpose is that, so therefore it has a Gvul in it. The interesting twist here, if you think about it, actually, this makes it even less Gvul than it really is. Because if it started out, let's say, like a big flow of infinite energy, and then simply due to gradations and evolution and the process, it gets diminished. So then it gets actually diminished. It gets diminished into a very narrow, into a limited form. But here, the whole purpose of it is for it to be Gvul. So it's not because it's limitation, this energy. It's on the contrary. This is a manifestation of the divine desire as much as the manifestation of pure Bli Gvul. So really, it's actually a Bli Gvul type of Gvul, if you think about it.
There's probably all Gvuls like that.
So really, in other words, the structure. Now we're talking about Atzmus. Atzmus is beyond Gvul and Bli Gvul. You can't talk about it there. You know, you say Atzmus, you say Shlilus Kol HaTeirim, means negating all descriptions, negating the positive and negating the negative. And you can't say it's this, you can't say it's that, you can't say this, it's not this, and you can't say it's not that. And you can't say it's not this, it's not this, etc. We're talking about in the world of expression, there's these two expressions. So the Kav, from the outset, is meant to be Gvul. That's how it was structured to be. And that's its purpose. So all the way from its root, it begins that way. Now he may have said this earlier in Maimorim, in the earlier sections of Ayin Beis. I don't recall these words, but it's very likely he did. But now we appreciate it more after everything we've learned, because we've learned that Keser. Remember, we said that there are three things in Keser, and the lowest part of Keser is the part that is connected to Gvul. Our intelligence comes from they're all makif. They're all three are makifim. They also called are transcendent to existence. But one is very much right a desire that is understood. There's a reason for it that our logic and consciousness can understand that desire. That's the lowest level of Keser. That was Keser from the word that it surrounds Atzilus. The second Keser was from the word crown above the head. That's already the unconscious. That's like Chachmas Tima. It's a reason. It's in the world of intelligence, but it's not a reason that we can relate to. So it's a deeper level of transcendence. And then there's the ultimate transcendence that is not even a conscious state. Etzem ha'er. And then there's even beyond that, which we're not discussing now. So if you think about it, why is it so important that it's in Keser? Just say there's Er HaGvul and there's Er HaBli Gvul. Because it's not on its own. The finite energy is rooted in the infinite energy. It's rooted in Keser, in desire. It didn't just come out as an incidental byproduct. It's not like God said, I want to have a Beis Hamikdash, and as a byproduct, I'll let you also have gold to use for other reasons. Now here, the entire structure of existence is defined by God's desire, and that in turn creates an energy that fulfills that desire, an energy that is a paintbrush, an instrument that will have chesed and gvura exactly as he defined it here.
Now many Atzilus and Bia also. The whole world is like this.
No, but at some point... No, but he doesn't say that. It's not correct. In Bia, you don't say that he and his energies and he his containers are one. There they become true gvul, not just the gvul because God desires it.
It's not Hashgacha Pratis, what we talked about?
No, I would not connect that here. You can't eliminate the structure of existence. There are levels where this is concealed to the point where there is actual materialism. There is a material yesh. It's not an illusion. Yeah, but you have free will also, and you can destroy.
The two sides of the same.
Are you seeing this here, or are you just saying this?
In the concept of free will, we don't see that here either.
But because I'm responding to, because since you're bringing up something that is not here, I'm countering it with something that's not here. If you go back to here,
free will isn't it?
Let's not talk about free will or what you're saying. Then you go back here. If you want to talk about what you're saying, that doesn't have anything to do with this discussion.
Nothing. The Ratzon of Hashem is not related to Hashgacha Pratis.
Not what he's talking about here. No. This has nothing to do with running existence. This is to do with the structure of existence, the 10 spheres, the building blocks. That there's fundamental structure to existence, not God running the show after existence is in place. That's another discussion. We also learned about it, Hashgacha, that we learned about how God, the different levels, but there's also concealment, and then there's free will. So you're going into a whole other discussion when you bring Hashgacha into the picture. You have to deal with the whole, contend with the whole other factors. I'm not saying it's not important, but I would not confuse it with here. It would make it very confusing. There'll be a lot of difficulties here. This is not negating that the world was created on its own. This is not negating the opposite of Hashgacha Pratis. This is simply stating that there's an energy that is gvul from the outside because God wants a structured existence. That's what it's stating here. And I thought you were saying once it gets into Biyah, the Biyah, this desire is concealed. At some point, all you have is structure, and you can completely forget that there is a will in this structure. She says, so this Medida Akbol is not what was neschadish through the Tzimtzum. It's not the concealment that brought out this structure. Because it had the structure from the beginning. So what did the Tzimtzum do? Because it had it before, the 10 hidden spheres. were there. They were hidden because they were completely encompassed, as he said, and did not have any shape and form. And they're also completely united with the source. What did the Tzimtzum do? The Tzimtzum allowed it to emerge. So the Tzimtzum didn't create the structure. The Tzimtzum allowed the structure to emerge as distinct entities. They should actually sense a Chochmah Bina. Before that, it's all part of a desire that doesn't have any manifestation. So the Tzimtzum allows them to become distinct entities, but even while they're distinct entities, they retain their so-called amorphous personality, bli ma. And he explained, because the kav is known as made of points. A point is also two opposites. On one hand, a point is no longer an invisible entity. A point. On the other hand, the point does not yet have shape and form. It's not yet blossomed into something of structure. But it's the beginning of structure. The point, the dot, the seed, as we discussed. And the kav is made of these nekudis. And these are the specific spheres as they stand in the kav. Later, in the kav, as we learned earlier, they still remain in an amorphous state, and when they enter the containers of Atzilus, that's when they take on the shape and form. But then he qualifies and says, there's also another place where we find nekudis, and that's nekudim of Tayu, akudim, nekudim, vrudim. But Tayu, there's the opposite. Here, we're talking about nekudah that's pshitus, that has no personality and no intensity. It concentrates a lot, but it doesn't have any intensity. In Tayu, on the other hand, take of a mitzias, which will cause obviously and then the shattering of the vessels. Take of a mitzias, spheres of Tayu, because it has the core of each sphere. So he explained this is because there the nekudah comes into kelim. There's containers. And therefore it has that intensity. But when there's no containers, all you have is pshitus. That's why you have 10 energies in one container in akudim beforehand. How could there be 10 energies? How could they coexist? Because there's no container yet. It's like a seed. In a seed you have all the details. So there can't be any conflict. It's when the details start developing, meaning you have containers that you can grasp, and suddenly you see arms and legs and other things, that's when you can start having conflict to the point of shatter. Then comes another stage when the energies are more subdued and the containers are more mature, so then they can join and again reconnect. So in other words, when you look at a seed there can't be any battle, because the energy is just all concentrated in one little container, in one dot, in one point. When that seed begins to develop and doesn't yet have maturity, it can conflict with each other, the points, as it does in Tayu, because the containers are now have emerged. Then comes a balanced, mature place where Kelim and Erdus learn to coexist. So it's like Echad, Sheni, and Shlishi. Like the first day, it says Yom Echad, not Yom Rishon, because all that existed was God's unity, was apparent light. Vahi Er. And God said, Yehi Toiv, that's good. Day 2 was created separation. Separation, it's no longer Nekudah. Now you have two entities. You have two entities, a higher and a lower water. You already have the ability of, like he says, Nivra Machlekes. Day 2, the potential for conflict begins. Because day 1, they were also, those two forces were there, but they were not as separate entities. Both higher and lower waters. The heavens and earth were all part of Bereshis Bara Elokim, one God's unity. So day 2 doesn't say Toiv. Doesn't say God said that He saw what He created and was good. Why? Because on its own you don't yet see good. What you see is separation. Day 3 comes, that's Atzilus. So day 1 is Akudim. 10 energies in one container. Day 2 is like Nekudim, separate energies, separate containers, and there's room for conflict. Day 3 comes, that's Atzilus. Tikkun, Shalom is introduced, Tiferes, the Kavim Tzai, that says the energies don't be so intense, the Kelim be more mature, and there you could have what's called Hiskalulus. So you have Hisachdus, Hischalkus, and Hiskalulus. Echad, Sheni, Shlishi. The first month, the second month, the third month. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. 1, 2, 3. So you have Hisachdus, everything is concentrated in one. 10 energies in one container. It then splits Hischalkus, which is important, diversity. And then comes Hiskalulus. Where is the clash possible? Like I mentioned about the tsunami, is when the air meets the keli. Large body of water, which is a tsunami, will not cause any destruction if there's no land, if it doesn't hit land. It's when the keli is a entity and there's a resistance, and the energy is too intense and the keli is too resistant, you have a collision. However, for example, when they build suspension bridges, it shakes. It's meant not to be rigid because it has to be flexible. And that's what allows it to carry far more weight. If the bridges were built with this type of this, it would have a keli and an air, and they would clash.
The wings of an airplane.
Yeah, a bird
cannot be rigid.
Right.
They have to
be flexible. It's called. They have to have buoyancy, and there's a word called when you say the wings as well. They have to have a certain flexibility. It's a matter of they have to have a certain element of dexterity.
That's this thing.
Right. What does that sound?
Somebody cleaning the street and the yard.
Okay. Anyway, so you see here, we say rach kekona al tehei kosher keodas el rach kekona. Don't be as rigid and inflexible like a cedar, a cedar tree, and be rach kekona, be gentle and flexible like a reed. And you see when a storm strikes, what happens? Yielding. People who know how to take a punch. A lot of martial arts is built on letting somebody else riding on their energy instead of resisting, knowing how to absorb, knowing how to pull back, etc., etc. Not just standing strong, because that's when things get broken. When you have to know how to go with the flow, as they say.
So before the Kav deposited the good stuff in Atzilus, we made a stop in Kudim and all this, and you had in the world of Tahu, which is north of Atzilus, so to speak.
Well, it goes like this: the Kav carries energy. It's the carrier of all energies of Ak. Then comes Akudim, and there the energy is intense, and the container is just emerging. Think of the Kav as just a type of
train,
an invisible thread that goes through all of existence. It threads its way. There comes a point where the seed emerges. Then the seed begins to break into parts. The Kav is not involved in that process. The Kav has just generated the process where it's brought Kalim into being. It's brought a lot of intense energy, and now the Kalim and the energy are going through this thing. And they shatter. The Kav continues its journey afterwards, as you said, south. As it goes into Atzilus, it becomes a much more balanced state.
It drops off some passages and no other way.
I wouldn't put it this way. You're talking time in this, that already. The analogy goes that far. I wouldn't say it's because it's not. It's all part of the process. It's all happening right now, all the time. So you think of it like Seisar Amnas Livnis. Even the destruction, even the shattering of the containers, was Almanas Seisar Amnas Livnis in order to build. So everything is part of the process. Tayu has a role to play. It's not just an accident that happened.
So ultimately, Yom Sheni is Kitov a few times, because that's the whole base.
That's why on day 3 you have Kitov twice. Also for day 2, because it shows right exactly. We wouldn't have Tikkun if there was no Tayu. Anyway, but he's not speaking about the shattering. He really wants to go back. So Kamoy Ba'Kudim Shah says it is Kos Kamoy Rakav. And this itself, what's taka the reason? Why is the Kav not in this state, like Tayu? Because the whole Kav is only to reveal a concealed structure in God's desire. Not Sfiras HaTayu. The Sfiras of Tayu have a purpose. The Tayu, Sfiras Tayu, Shama Kavanah Elias B'chinas Metzias. There you want a Metzias that has a certain purpose, like it's discussed elsewhere. That's why it comes in containers. The Kav is only to reveal that which was concealed in the 10 hidden spheres, which takes us back to an original theme early on, that the structure of existence, is it Gilead Helam or Yesh Ma'ayin? So you see how far back, bending backward, the Rabbi Rashab is going to demonstrate that it's Gilead Helam. as much as he can. It's a very important point. Because he wants to show that the structure of existence can also be united with the divine. He wants to show that the structure of existence is also connected with the infinite. So therefore, because the desire of God is for structure, so as far deep as he can go into desire, he'll take structure. You hear what I'm saying? Which was really the essence of everything that was being discussed. Spheres. First it's a number, then it's a story, then deeper it's behirus, it's clarity, it's transparency, it's brightness, and then it's behirus of Eir HaBligvul. Sphere, all sphere. Why? Because he wants to show that in the deepest place possible, the structure of existence began. But it's not in the deepest place at all, because there are places that are beyond structure. But as far as you can go, because there's a place where you no longer talk about structure altogether, you just talk about God's being revealed. So there's the element of God's bligvul just expressing itself, including also in a structure, and then there's the God desire for a structure. They're not the same thing. Because there's a need for the structure to also recognize that there's something beyond it. Because we can't have it becoming so say, you know what, my structure is so important, it goes all the way to Atzmos. You need bittul, which we shall soon learn about. Because you could say, why not just say structure all the way to the top? Why is there another air called the bligvul? As we'll soon discuss, because the air bligvul achieves a different role. Its role is to bring bittul into existence. So now we have the structure, but the structure too, he doesn't want to eliminate it. So he takes it as far as it can go. Not just in the 10 hidden spheres, but the 10 hidden spheres themselves arose shir atzmei b'keich in an bligvul, in an artist at bligvul, and they're not detached. So in Keser is rooted the structure of existence. In Eir Ein Sof is rooted the structure. That's what he's saying here. So it's Gilia Helam. When you look at the structure of existence, you can look at it two ways. You can say, you know what, this is a very important structure. Even God wants it. We have to respect it. Or you can say, you know what, the whole structure is meaningless. Because God is really bligvul. These are two philosophies. Right? For example, I'll give you the two philosophies without mentioning names. There are even among Jews, there was a theory, and some have it today too. Dina de Malchus Adina. When this world, Hashemayim l'shamayim la'Hashem, ha'aretz nasan lebnei Adam. Yes, we have to follow God's rules. There's halacha. But when you're in Mordechai, in the Shar HaMelech, and you're dealing with government, and you're dealing with this world, you have to follow its rules. God wants you to follow those rules. Dina Malchus Adina. He wants you to follow the rule of the land. There's a strong case to be made. Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos, in the morning when you daven, then you're connecting to the bligvul of Elokus, to higher things. When you're in the world, you have to play by the rules of the world. Yes, ethically, according to Torah. But gvul is real gvul. Other extreme approaches, what are you talking about? Gvul. Gvul is an illusion, not an illusion. Gvul is a stepping stone toward bligvul. The whole world is a pruzdur, the Mishnah says. The whole Elam Hazeh is a corridor to come to Elam Haba. You'll find many Jews, you ask them, why are we here? To do mitzvahs, so we should be good zeichet to Elam Haba. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein's Levaya, they were telling the children that if you want to have a funeral like this, you have to start young. You understand? Huh? That's what they say. Now, because there are many people who say Olam Hazeh is all it's a pruzder. It's a kleine brick, wie man sagt, you know. The whole world is a small bridge to a greater place. Chassidus explains, and this is the Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe, since we're talking Chavdal Tevis, Chassidus Chabad, is a third approach. Seemingly, what could be a third approach? It's either this or that. The third approach is that the Gvul that God created is fundamentally divine, just like the Bligvul. And therefore, it's not just you escape into Bligvul Yom Kippur. Dina Malchus Adina, yeah, you follow the rules, not because they're rules. Because God created a structure He wants you to follow. The reason you can't jump 10 feet high and you can't function without eating is not because we're limited, it's because God wanted the structure to be this way. The same God that wanted Yom Kippur, you shouldn't eat, wants you to eat, like the story with Rab Zusha and his brother, Rab Zusha and Rab Melech. when he was in prison. And he was sad. So his brother said to him, what are you sad? We taught by the Baal Shem Tov, we have to be besimcha every time, with joy. He says, I'm not sad because I'm in prison. I'm sad because I can't make a bracha for 3 weeks already. Since I'm here, there's a pail in the cell. I can't make a blessing. It's like a bathroom. She says, so Rabbi Elimelech tells Rav Zusha, the same God that said you make a bracha also said that when there's a pail in the room, you don't make a bracha. So you're also fulfilling God's desire. So he said, yeah, you're right. And he began to celebrate. All the inmates started seeing he's celebrating. You know how it goes. Why not? They're bored anyway. Let's celebrate. Good excuse. The guard, who's a real anti-Semite, comes running. He says, why are you celebrating? He says, the Jew there is celebrating. So we're joining him. Why is he celebrating? We don't really know, but it has something to do with the pail in his room. So the guard came and says, really? I'll show you, Jew, dirty Jew. And he pulls the pail out of the room. That's the story goes. The Friedrich Rebbe, when he was in prison, they asked him, do you know where you are? Because he wasn't cooperating. They wanted to tell him, do you know where you are? You should have respect for where you are. He says, yes, I know where I am. I'm in a place that's potter from the mezuzah. A place that's exempt from a mezuzah. Because why? Because like a stable of susim, a stable of horses. And the Rebbe explains, it wasn't just trying to shtech them and to show them that he doesn't care about them. He was bringing a godliness here too. That there's a mitzvah, just like there's a place to put a mezuzah, there's places where you don't put a mezuzah. That's also a mitzvah. It's also God's desire. So he was bringing God's revelation in a place that was patim and mezuzah. In other words, everything becomes a positive force.
So are you still trying to explain?
One second, I didn't finish. I'm going back. So you could right, exactly. So what's the point? That means, so the fact that God wants us to follow rules is not because the rules have any power. That's why the Friedrich Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe, when he came out of prison, Pei Ayin, he repeated the words of the Rebbe Rashab, Yehi Hashem Elokeinu Imanu. Not with our will did we go into Golus, not with our will would we go out of Golus. It's only God's will that and therefore, the fact that we're here is not because someone has power over us, because God wants us to be here. So then, wherever you are, is it Gvul? Does Gvul have power? Yes, Gvul has power because God gave it power, but don't worship it. So even while you're following the rules, you're following them because God said so. So you have to follow them, not because the world is Tefes Mokim and the heaven is given to God and earth is given to man. That itself is defined by a divine. So that's also so there's no so on one hand you have to immerse yourself in the structure of existence. A mitzvah, it's negeya. It's not just a pruzdur. We're not just talking about a corridor to Olam Haba. We're not talking about escaping. Okay, now I dealt with this world, now I'm escaping into Bligvul. This is the purpose. On the other hand, this is not the only thing that exists. There's also levels that are beyond the structure. And the structure itself has to realize, because I'm not just me, I'm part of a bigger God. A bigger God has Bligvul. And there's the bittul that it elicits. So it's a third approach. It's not the approach of escaping to Bligvul or giving real recognition to Gvul, but it's understanding Gvul in a new way. That the Gvul itself is a divine Gvul, and as we'll learn, as we know, and that makes actually the Gvul much more powerful, because if you're giving it to the power of the government, so it's as powerful as they are. They're limited. If God says He wants a Gvul, then you could be rest assured it's a real Gvul. It's a Gvul in its fullest sense of the word, on every possible way. And Gvul doesn't mean a bad thing. Gvul is simply a power. It's a power to express yourself in a certain way. Just like there's a power to express in infinite ways, there's a power to express in a certain way. Now, would you say that this defines God? No, God forbid. To say God is defined by the expression that He chose to express it would be saying Chesed is God? No, you say Hu Mekayme Shel Ve'ein Elam Mekayme. He is the place of the world, meaning everything here is a divine expression. But not everything here is the ultimate divine expression. Now, of course, there's the yesh. What the yesh does, it reveals atzmos and air. But the bottom line is that there is a whole new way of looking at it. This is Chassidus Chabad at its core. And you see how meticulous and how careful, and with such care, the Rebbe Rashab is trying to help us understand how the gvul of our existence goes as far as it can go. He's taking it not, which really also explains all those different shittas, the mukabalim that hold whether the energy is defined or not defined. And he goes, in this drush, he keeps saying we're going to the shitta that it is defined. Because he wants to show how the definition of structure of existence is all the way rooted in the energy itself. According to the other opinion, it has also its qualities, but there the quality is fundamentally the other way around. There, it's that leaving the gvul is inferior, and the real focus is on the pshittis, on the ratzon, on God's desire. Here you're getting a far more intricate, according to the shitta that is seared, far more complicated. It's a lot easier to resolve a lot of problems if you just said was bli gvul and kelim are gvul. When you say er is gvul, you see how complicated it becomes. Because then where's er gvul and where's it bli gvul and where does it start? It's far more complicated. So I was telling somebody the shir here, I think I said it maybe, and it's quite emotional when you think about it. We learn it a level, another level, but think of a father bending down to help his child learn to walk. You start here, 1 step, 2 steps, 2, 3 steps, 3 steps. And you guide him along all the way, you train him. The love that goes into that type of act, which is not writing big books, not making a lot of money. You're bending down. The Mashal Chassidus very often, father bends down, lifts his child. And that is Atzmus itself. Because the simplicity of it, the love in it, the purity. There's no agenda. There's no ulterior motive. Pure. But think of now somebody's sitting and making stepping stones. Here, we came to a river. You can't cross the river, the little child. So I'll make steps. I'll put my hands, you walk on my hands, step by step by step, from here to here. Imagine then that Rebbe Rashab sitting and writing Ayin Beis. That's exactly what he's doing. He's a father, a master, a Rebbe, sitting and building the stepping stones and showing, don't think your existence is trapped. Don't think you're trapped. There's steps, and I'm showing you the steps, not just in Kalim and Eir, and one level of Eir, another level of Eir, all the way going to the root. You think of Chassidus that way? Trust me, you learn Chassidus completely differently. We become detached. We learn the book as if it's like, okay, a technical book, and I got to get the mathematics right, and where's what fit. But think of it like a caring father, a caring parent, literally helping us, giving us the stepping stones. Here's what you do, my son. Here, next step, next step, next step. That's what the Alter Rebbe did with Chassidus Chabad. Likutei Amorim, the first section, the main bulk of Tanya, is really a book of eitzes. It wasn't a book the Alter Rebbe sat down to write, a book of doctrine. It was a book of eitzes. He was giving people advice. As he writes the introduction, there was no time, so he couldn't meet anymore individually. Now, of course, in the advice there's doctrine, because the advice is not just superficial advice. It's based on fundamental doctrine, deep doctrine. But what it comes down to, it's a personal connection. It's a personal connection. So there's no such thing in Chassidus that you just learn the message. There's a method with the message. There's a warmth with the message. There's a personal thing. When you read it that way, you read it completely differently. That's why we say that the Haskalah and Aveda are one thing in that sense. You read this, you read, what are the steps? How is he helping us connect? How does this step help more Achdus in existence, in my life? How do I get more refined to be able to travel on this journey? And you see how, as I said, the painstaking effort, hundreds of pages, just to help explain. And it's the only way you can really explain why the Rebbe Rashab would be sitting and writing this. For the record, what to answer what? God doesn't need it. God knows what He created. It's for us to understand the process. Step by step by step. And so it's every letter is gushing with love. Think of it that way. You learn it differently then, because if you were standing with the Rebbe Rashab in his room right now, or the Rebbe, or the Alter Rebbe, and you said to the Alter Rebbe, tell me what are the secrets, tell me how to live a good life, the best possible life. And he starts telling you this maimer. And you say, I don't know what he's talking about. Why is he telling me a maimer? I'm asking him how to live my life. And he's telling me a thing about Kav, and Tzimtzum, and Gvul, and Esesfiras Agnuzis. But since you respect the Rebbe, what would you do? When you go out of Yechidus, you say to somebody, I asked the Rebbe how to live a good life. And he gave me a whole esoteric discussion. So a real chassid would tell you, he answered your question. What do you think, the Rebbe didn't hear what you said? He didn't answer in your terms. He didn't tell you, go, here's where you buy candies. and here's where you make money, and here's where you find a spouse. He told you the secrets of what will make you happy, except he spoke about it in a language that you don't really understand. It's cryptic. But let me explain to you. Kav is not kav. Kav is a stepping stone. It's a stone for you to understand a step of how you climb from here to here. And let's find in your life where you'll need that in your life. Now, why am I making the point? Because if the Rebbe called you in and told this to you, you would have no doubt that he's talking to you. When he writes it in a book and you weren't there, you say, who says this is me? Maybe he means somebody else. That's what I'm saying. You learn this, you have to imagine, it's a simple thing, that this was not written for the mass, just for everybody and for different generations. This is as if the Rebbe Rashab called you in. When I say Rebbe Rashab, I mean all the 7 Rabbeim as one here. The Alter Rebbe writes something in Tanya, is if he called you in and told you this. Now, yeah, it doesn't mean every page is relevant to you every second of your life, which also is true. It is. But nevertheless, the whole picture of it will be negated to you in your life at some point. Like it says, the 42 Masois, when the Jews traveled in the wilderness, the Baal Shem Tov says, every one of us goes through in our lifetime all 42 journeys. And in one place it says, every day we go through 42 journeys. So every step here we go through all the time. However, obviously you have to start step by step. You can't learn it all. But the challenge is, that's really the challenge. How do you take a piece here and say, how is this an answer to me, to my life? Is this a fair approach?
Sounds like Michigan people. I mean, about
But one second, based on what I just said, one second, no. And if you were standing in front of the Rebbe Rashab, would you also say that?
No.
So you're standing with him.
I'm sorry. I don't understand something with this whole thing with the calf. Like, I always imagine calf.
But you know what? Even if you don't understand, just think of it. The Rebbe Rashab is bending down to you and helping you walk a little. Scary. I feel special if that's happening. He's scared.
More than all this, that's what I felt when I was that muscle you gave in the prison with the pail. Can't get away from that. And I've heard it before from you, but I just see it today.
It's gewaltig splash.
In terms of calf, I always imagine.
We're back to the mathematics.
Calf is this, basically. What does it say about the calf? It's going till
Tachtis Atzilus, sometimes the middle of Atzilus. But that's the original Kav. Then there's the reflection of the Kav.
Okay.
Which again is not physical, it's gradations.
But what does it mean when he says that Kav is Nekudas Mufshotos? That's what I always understood that at each level it becomes.
You ever see? I'll give you an example. You ever see an artist uses first a very broad stroke with a one paintbrush, and then they take a very fine paintbrush and begin to make the details.
Okay.
So the kav, think of it as just being energy. It's just planting the nekudas everywhere. It's basically Chochma Bina. Then there's going to be the development of Chochma Bina as it enters into containers.
Kav carry basically everything, including the containers.
It's only carrying the containers, but it doesn't. It's not the root of the containers. I told you many times. And the neshama does not create your body; it just carries it to you. That's why after death, the body doesn't decompose. The kelim are rooted in a divine source called Keach HaGvul.
Okay.
Letters, like the letters are not rooted in the idea; they're rooted elsewhere. But the idea bring forth the letters; they reveal the letters. That's a different discussion. We learned this already.
Kav carries it.
Carries it, but it's not energy. The letters, it just carries it. That's a different story. So, it carries the power. Let me ask you a question. You're 5 and some foot tall, right? One point you were just a seed in your mother's womb. Mm-hmm. Tell me, how did this body come from? Energy created it, or energy revealed it? The seed contains the power of it all, but then other forces come into play, and a person begins to eat, you drink, you breathe, and the body begins to develop. The kav just carries the kernel of it, the seed of it. Kav is like made up of seeds, basically. The seeds include the seeds of containers, and also the energies. But fundamentally, the kav is an energy flow. It's like, think of it like this. Think of it like you have a bunch of seeds here on the ground, and then water comes in, and the water makes them grow. So some say the water made it grow. No, the water didn't make it grow. The water just was a catalyst that got it going. Now, if the water also carried the seeds, fine, but the water didn't create the seed. The water carried the seeds and then it made it grow. That's what a kav is like. It's energy. It's an energy flow. It's a carrier. Some things are inherent to the kav and some things are just passing through the kav.
Got another example besides water?
There's hundreds of examples. I mean, in life you have many examples. The soul and the body is a good
What does
example.
it mean that kav ends at Tachlis Atzilus? What?
Well, he didn't say that here. That's you're bringing it from other places. Because you asked me.
Yes.
But I'm just so again, you know what says here says here. Since you asked, I told you. It's not relevant really here. That just means that the kav is too intense. At some point, to create the containers that are so gross and so tangible and so materialistic on lower levels, it can't be the kav itself. It's a reflection of the kav.
Oh, okay. There's nothing else.
It's an echo of the kav, if you wish. Yeah. It's a diminished state. What is that noise? It's making me so annoying.
Furniture polisher or sander.
Some downstairs.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, a plane.
Can you open this door and just see if it's in? Right here, this door, right here.
What? Oh, this door.
No.
Doesn't seem to be coming from here. Especially from outside. Want me to look outside?
You forget about it. Okay.
Yonder.
Hmm? Okay. So the whole point is that guf peshein akav urak legalis min halam v'loik me'spiris ateu. V'alkein bo b'chinas kel mashenken bakav hakavon urak his galos asfiris me'alamam. That's the spiris sagnuzis. That's the whole role of the kav, is to reveal. So that's Gilia Helen. It's revealing what is concealed in that spiris sagnuzis, which is itself revealing what is concealed in God's desire for Shir Atzmei B'Kayach. V'alkein ein shom kelim v'hein b'b'chinas pshitas. U'kashara eidus n'shlapsha b'kelim d'Atzilus, and with energies.
Want to go through?
Move the camera. The whole camera is out of order. If the whole thing is.
There we go.
Okay. When the energy is manifest in the containers of Atzilus, that's where they nasu b'chinas mitzias b'chinas chochma ve'era chesed. So I go back. The best example, there are many examples, but I keep giving the example of letters and ideas. When you start your education, and I'm not sure why. Just go back to this mashal and you'll understand it all. Just use this mashal, think about it until it becomes part of you. You begin in the kindergarten, you learn letters. That's containers. The letters have ideas. We can build ideas and contain within them all the ideas that will be collected together that will from the letters when they're combined into words, and words into phrases and sentences, into paragraphs, chapters, books, and all the knowledge that there's out there. But it begins the other way around. That's how we climb from the bottom up. From the top down, it began with infinite energy that has no manifestation yet, then energy that will later become expressed in letters until we get all the letters. So if you go from the top down, it starts with energy. then the energy wants to express itself in a certain way. So you have an idea that has parameters. In order for the parameters to really take hold, you need letters to express those parameters. There's letters in thought, there's letters in speech, there's letters in writing. There's engraved letters, there's written letters. So you have many, many levels of how an idea, which already has parameters, but an idea, as we learned with Shammai and Hillel, when they heard their teacher speak, it had chesed and gvura in it. But until it came into the container of Shammai, it didn't take the shape of gvura. That's Atzilus, when it hits the Keli in the fullest sense. But the Kav has already energy in it. The Kav, think of the Kav as being the pen of the writer. The writer is going to, or the mouth of the storyteller. Sipur. In his mouth, in his hand, he's writing, and this has the flow, he's going to write many words. But he wants to write one idea. But to express it to someone, it needs containers. The containers don't emerge immediately. First comes the idea, comes the energy. So the Kav is revealing that type of energy, that message, that God wants 10 spheres. The 10 spheres have energy. Each Chachma is the Eir HaChachma, Eir HaBina. But as long as they're still in energy, they're not been written down yet. They haven't been expressed in letters. They haven't been expressed in any defined way. So from the top down, it begins with energy. But there's also containers. Where do the containers come from? Well, since God wants structure, He also wants containers where it will really manifest. Where they finally come together is when the idea and the words on the page, there you go. That's Eris and Kalim. How's the idea before it hits the letters on the page? It could be in your mind. It could be in a more abstract way. All the way upward, it could be 10 energies in one container. You say one letter, Aleph, and the Aleph of Anoichi has the whole Torah in it. Then you say Anoichi, spelled out a little more. Then you say Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, Aseres HaDibros, the whole Torah, Torah Sheba'al Peh. You spell it out to infinite details. So is this not clear?
What makes that connection? Like basically everything is being carried by the Kav. It's not like in your motion.
Not everything is being.
Tsunami, everything is being carried by the Kav.
But the Kav is not the root of everything. Letters are not the root. Are not originate in Seichel. They originate in a different place. There are people who have ideas and can't write. There are people who have ideas and can't speak.
Okay.
So right. But in this case, the energy can carry the letters, but the letters don't come from the energy. The energy, the idea it comes from one place, and the containers come from another. But the energy also carries the containers. The energy organizes them. The energy expresses them.
What happens? So at a certain level.
Why don't you go before that? At a certain level, there's no energy and no containers. Why are you assuming that energy is the root of everything? Atzmus is the root of everything.
I understand. But
Atzmus, one second. Atzmus is neither energy or containers. It's neither an idea nor letters.
Nor is it not an idea.
Exactly. It's not. This Atzmus wants to have an existence.
okay.
So there's two things that happen when he wants to have it. One is an energy that's bli gvul. One is an energy of gvul.
Okay.
And then there's koyach gvul. Then there's also you need containers.
Okay.
So you have three different paths going on here.
So
they all originate from the same place. But for it to be a structured existence as we know it, you need to have these three different so-called parallel paths.
Everything is being carried through that Kav?
No, the Kav is only one aspect of this. There's a lot more going on here. There's also there's the energy before the Kav. I mean, I don't know what you're asking. You're bringing other things into the story here. Tell me what the question. I don't see what the problem is. No, right here he's saying that the Kav is rooted in the 10 hidden spheres, and it carries the energy of the 10 spheres. He's not talking about the Kav carrying other things. You're bringing in things you learned elsewhere. There are. So what? So what? Why don't you learn what he's saying here? The Kav carries the Esesphiras Agnozis, which are complete pshitas, like we learned earlier at length.
Right.
The Kav, after the Tzimtzum, conceals the Er HaBli Gvul and allows the Kav now to create distinct points. The point of Chachma, the point of Bina. But it's only a point. A point now has to be developed. And Natzilus, they become developed into full entities called Chesed Gvura. That's all he's saying right here.
But also,
you're asking me other things now. You're bringing other Maimorim that are not being said here. No, as soon as you bring other things, that's why you're confused. Maybe you shouldn't bring other things. Maybe just learn this.
You're right. But
if I were you, I wouldn't bring other things because you see it's confusing you.
Because I thought that Akudim, at a certain point, a Kav kind of like becomes this floor, number 44. This is akudim.
What do you mean? Right now there's akudim, and now there's nekudim. It's happening all the levels.
All the time, but it's basically everything is being carried by the.
I know what you mean by the word everything. He just said here. All he's saying here is that it carries Chachma Bina, the 10 hidden spheres, which is the structure that God wants. He wants 10 spheres.
At a certain point, reveal themselves as akudim, as okud b'kliyechot.
After the tzimtzum, the kav emerges.
Right.
It's carrying the 10 hidden spheres. Now they've become points. They're no longer just complete invisible amorphous. They're points. They're no longer. Okay.
So at what level they suddenly become an...
What do you mean suddenly? There's no suddenly. It's a constant process that's constantly happening.
Right.
It's just levels that are happening right now. It's just like I told you, a seed in a mother's womb. Why don't you go like that? Then after 3 months, after 9 months, after 6 months, first trimester, second trimester, then there's birth. Yeah, exactly.
Then nekudim,
right. And then Atzilus is where they become a full.
I'm thinking, I understand but my problem. I'm thinking linearly. I'm thinking like as an elevator, like at a certain point.
You could think like that, but then you have to then you have to qualify that it's happening all the time.
Right.
Like in life, it doesn't happen. Once you're a seed, once you've been born, you're no longer a seed. Here, it's constant process. All the steps are happening all at once.
And what the Rabbi is telling us here, that basically the way we should see the calf is that this has no Dorim. It's mufshadik. This is so. It's even.
But it's nekudis. You go back to chapter 31, and he spells it out more detailed there. Basically, nekudis. It's like as I told you. A nekuda means you already made a point. There's a point. Before that, there's no point. You can't even call points. I just gave the example. There are ideas. There's a space where these ideas haven't yet even developed yet, but they're somewhere in the unconscious. Then there's an idea that's developed. Then there's an idea that manifests a little more revealed. Then there's an idea that's expressed in words, in your thought. Then in your thought there's speech. I mean, I can give you want 50 levels.
But they're all carried by the kav.
I know what the word kav means. This to me means nothing when you say carried by the kav. You explain to me what that means. What means carried by the kav has no. This process, what I just said, that's the kav. The process of an amorphous state coming. That's the kav. What do you mean carried by? They make it sound like the kav is a physical entity that is introduced. All it is a kav is simply a process.
Okay.
That's all. So this is the process of how energy travels. That's the kav.
And everything, all of existence travels.
I don't know what that means. He's not saying that. He's saying here the structure of the 10 spheres. When you say all of existence, what do you mean by all of existence? Bligvul too? What about Kalim? What about Makif? What do you mean all of existence? You say all of existence. The kav does not create a table. So, mean all of existence. Where's the table? The kav itself has no power to create a table. So it carries, but it's not what he's talking about here. Why do we keep going to a place that he's not discussing? I need to know why. Because you learned other things?
No, because we're confused. No,
we learned.
Why don't you just, if you're confused, I would suggest learn and understand what he says here, and then broaden your knowledge. Doesn't that make sense? If you start bringing more things, you'll be more confused.
I'm questioning because I don't understand.
What don't you understand? You're bringing in previous conceived ideas, or you're talking about... So if you are, then you're for sure not going to understand. Okay. So basically, how could one learn something if you're going to bring all kinds of other ideas in?
We learned it in this year. There was a Rishima.
But we're not learning it now. When we'll get there, we'll talk about it.
Like on a general note, like I noticed that from time to time we all have the same problem. I mean, your students sitting here in that room, that suddenly we understand that we don't understand the most basic things that you were talking and.
You know why? Because this problem, because the problem that's happening now is happening the whole time.
Right.
You bring all your stuff, your all preconceived notions.
Right. Listen,
it's not a clean slate.
It's not a clean slate. Listen.
It's a critical component, because if it's not a clean slate, I clean my whole slate when I read this. My key here is not because I know more, I learned more than you did. It's the opposite. I block out everything. I just learned this. Just learning this. That's the problem everybody has. They don't listen to what is being said. They're bringing other things. They listen partially, but it's also part of they're fitting it into a picture they have already. That's the biggest problem. That's why I told you, being a chayzer of the Rebbe, you had to completely clean out. It made no difference what was yesterday. That knowledge will come later. I have plenty of knowledge of other places. I know what you're talking about. I'm specifically not going there.
Okay.
Why? Because you're not able to concentrate on this. You're not going to be able to get that.
Just don't get upset. Listen, it's happening from time to time. And it's,
One second.
I think you should assess us as we are.
But just as you said what you said, I have to say one thing. I don't get upset. I've never gotten upset. I don't get upset.
Get a little bit,
it's called passionate.
Passionate. Okay. I'm sorry.
You want me to be just cold and just listen to you and say nothing? I'm reacting.
No.
My reaction is telling you that you have to learn how to learn.
Right.
And to learn how to learn is you have to focus on what is being said. What does it mean? I gave a whole series of examples to understand Eris and Kalim and how we travel from the kindergarten to this. This example I've said maybe 30 times. You know that nobody ever refers to this example. So I wonder why. It seems to me an example that fits very well. Trying to explain it more on our level. So I know why. Because you keep going back to your words. You have kav, simtsum. You're not applying it. If I challenged you, can you explain to me Seder Shtalshlus in simple English? I never did that. You'll have a very difficult time doing that.
You're not going to be in the final?
There's no finals, but you'll have a very difficult time. Why is that? So one has to wonder. We're sitting already a year learning or whatever. One has to wonder. So if you can't do that, what have you learned? What have I taught? So maybe I taught some Geshmak ideas. No, sir. I'm not saying this as a complaint. Trust me. I'm just saying it as a statement, an observation. So you learned some things that you learned that I understand. That I know you learned. You learned that I'm able to communicate these ideas. You learned also, I'm sure, some ideas in a Geshmak way and understand. But if you can't present it, it means you haven't really integrated it. That's the big challenge here. So when you say the word kav, I know exactly the word. I mean, everybody who learns Chassidus knows the word kav, and they'll tell you all kinds of things. But ask somebody, can you tell it to me in simple English without using any Hebrew, and tell it to me as if I'm a secular person on the street who never heard anything about Chassidus. You're not going to find many people that can do that, right? You can find people who have obviously Yisrael. They'll be kind. They'll put on tefillin on the person. But to explain to them in simple English what the kav is and why I need to know there's a kav, very few can answer that. Because we're not trained to think like that. We're trained, we lean on the crutches of words that we're accustomed to. Now I think everybody understands that the kav seems to be an instrument that God uses for all of creation. I think everybody knows that. But what does that mean? What does it even mean? What does that mean, an instrument? That's why you need examples from real life. Show me a kav as it works itself in your life. I could show you my life. I'm a writer. I write. I'm teaching right now. There's a kav at work in my life right now. No, is this the kav of Atzmos? No, that's not the kav of Elikus, but the kav inside of me. Think of it that way. That's the question. Show me the kav in your life. The kav is a thread that's going from a very abstract place to a far more defined place. That's what a kav is. Sa'chakel. That's all you need to say. And then find in your life that example. Find in your life the example of something that's going from a more undefined place to a defined place. And that process is the kav. It doesn't have to be physical. It doesn't have to be a pencil. It doesn't have to be a pipe. That's what it is. You follow what I just said?
Yeah, I follow. It's a process.
That's the kav. Hold on. There's no buts.
Okay.
If you give me a but now to this, you're going to something else that's not what we're learning. I'm giving you an example that is integrated, that I can explain it at length. I could tell you the whole process. And when I have an idea, I don't know where the idea comes from, but I know it comes from a deeper place, Chachmas Tema or wherever. It comes into my mind, then I sit down and I say, this is a great idea, I'm going to now type it up. I'm not just typing letters. There's a flow going on here. There's ideas. I could dissect and say, 1 second, why am I not getting it into words right? Why is it taking me to write? Why do I have to write it 10 times? Because there's a process. The flow is a very scientific process. Now, if I could document it, that would be a kav. And you'll see it'll be a stage of nekudis, before nekudis, akudim, nekudim, vrudim, all the way till tangible letters on a page. You begin to respect this process and this flow, you'll be able to retrace the steps. The Rebbe Rashab said 8 hours, they say, he stood when he was thinking Ayin Beis. And didn't move for 8 hours. And I'm sure it was much more than 8 hours other times. Then he sat and wrote. of flow. This is his kav. And he knew exactly what he wants to write on each page, and so on. Now, covering this. If you're able to relate to what I just said, I think you're at the beginning of the process of understanding the kav. No, so you're going to say, well, I learned that the kav also brings kalim. How does that fit to your mashal? So I'll say to you, you know what? You learned. Right now you didn't learn. That's not what we're talking about now. Let's learn first the first step. Then we'll introduce the idea of kalim, where kalim come from. Here, I have an idea flowing right now. I'm taking a pen, I'm writing it down. And my question is, where do the letters come from? They're definitely not coming from my idea. They were there before. I'm just using them. So how are they coming on paper? An excellent question. No problem. But you have at least something to work with, and now you develop the idea until you begin to understand more and more and more. Go ahead, say what you got to say. What's your rebuttal?
No, I'm absorbing.
Let me explain that.
When I got stuck here when I read this thing about the kaf and then right away about the Elam Tehu. Because Tehu is basically coming out from the kaf, kind of like from the process. It's part of the process. So he is telling us that Tehu is really something that you can define.
So the three traits stop together.
But then he also made a contrast between the Nekudus of Tayu and the Nekudus of the Kav, right? Did you read that too?
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the problem? Tayu, where'd you ever hear that Tayu equals the Kav? The Kav and Tayu are not the same entity. He's distinguishing between when you say the word Nekudus and the Kav, Nekudus and the Tayu. Do you know how he distinguished? Or you got confused before you read what he said? He distinguished. He says there's kalim there.
Right.
And the kav there's no kalim.
That's why I...
Okay, so... Do we move on? Not only would I tell you to move on, the Rebbe Rashab is now going to give a mashal. Maybe you learn. What's confusing is not what it says here. It's confusing what you know from before.
This is such a rich discussion. We should talk a bit more. No? I said it's been such a rich discussion. We should talk a bit more.
I have no problem trying to explain it as best as I can.
Super.
You have to figure out what's really bothering, what's the troubling part here. He distinguished between the Nekudus of the Kav and the Nekudus of Tayu. Where one has containers and therefore there's a mitzvah, the other one does not have, therefore it's pshitus, it's shapeless. I gave the example of the tsunami. That's where there's a collision. In the Kav there can't be a tsunami because there's no containers. Like in Akudim even there's no containers. And Kolshkein, as he said, for sure in the Kav. I gave the example of day 1, day 2, day 3. I mean, I don't know what else I can say.
So we realize that the ore comes down through the kav in the form of the cruise, and then you say that the kalim, how's the kalim delivered then? We have an energy delivery system, the kav, and then it seems to leave out. Now you say that I think the roots and kalim is stuck in there. Just
think of them as letters. The containers are there from before. The containers it's not really relevant here.
This example with a pen. You have this idea, and
the containers are. He's not discussing that here. He's talking the energy. The containers, as I've said to you many, many times, is a different track. It's a track that God wants to have a structured existence. So there's going to be containers. But there's also the idea within the structure. That's a structured idea. There's a structured idea. There's structured expression of the idea in letters and containers.
What is that?
Kayach Hagvul.
But is it?
The Shimu.
But it also basically runs
the
process of the calf.
That's not what's discussed here. Even so, even if case, it's only being carried by the kav. It's like the kav is energy, and on the back of the energy, God is also putting the seeds for the containers.
Igulim of the calf?
No. That's a separate issue.
That's not what carries the...
Well, it's not what he's discussing here, that's for sure, correct? So why do you need to know this? I just gave an example. If you can't explain the kav to yourself or to someone else, so why do you need to bring in more things that if you can't even explain the basic kav, why do you want to bring in igulim and kalim into it? That's my question to you. Because, and I'm training you right now how not to be what's called reckless or even destructive thinking. You can't even explain to me the kav, what it is. You want to already explain how the kav carries containers and nigulim. First understand the kav in your life. And trust me, it'll be far easier for you to bring it down to the understanding all the other elements of the kav. That's the first challenge. See, if you're a mathematician, you want to know all the details that you've learned and fit them in. But if you want to personalize it, you have to take a different approach. Figure out what the kav is in your life.
I think it all started when you brought up...
You see, if you were masters of it, then we could talk about the rest of it. But I don't think, I see from the questions, first master the one subject. I said the example of letters, words. Where do you think you stand in the knowledge of Chassidus? Do you know letters? Do you know words? Do you know phrases and sentences? Do you know paragraphs, chapters, volumes? Where do you think you stand? Now, I'm not talking about humility. Where do you really think if you have to assess yourself? Be honest.
See this
Maybe the
101.
misper.
No, seriously, where do you think?
Yeah,
See this 101.
So then my suggestion is, would you go teach a kindergarten child a whole book? Or even a chapter if they can't read the letters yet? Right? They'll get confused. Let's master the letters.
I'll tell them.
Now I don't think...
I'll tell them the story.
You'll tell him the story, but then if you keep focusing on the story, every time you bring a letter, he says, how does this fit into the story? You'll say, well, first let's learn the letters. He doesn't know how to read yet. He doesn't know how to read an aleph and Beis.
If I would be Shleiman Melech, I would give 3,000 Mushalim, etc.
But why do children have to go through... Why don't just speed up the process? The fact is a child has to go through 1 year, they learn aleph Beis, and then they develop it. It doesn't work that way. There's no way to force it. You can't speed up the process. Now, I don't think you guys are on the level of letters. I think the biggest problem is I would say, undisciplined thinking skills. No one's ever trained you to think.
Yeah, that's
One of the things they do, one of the things that university does, which I would immediately implement in every yeshiva, that people should write papers and papers and papers and papers for no reason. Because it forces you to express an idea that someone else can read and comment on and critique. We're not forced to do it. And therefore our ideas are never challenged in a real way. In Gemara, good, we have a chavrusa and we learn with each other. There's a little challenge there. But even more, if somebody wrote it down, write down your idea. You see how often it happens here when we have a disagreement, I say, give me the alternative. And no one gives an alternative. They just know how to argue with what I'm saying. Because no one taught them how to express themselves. So, and this doesn't mean people don't have good minds. One of the things I learned from geometry, pure geometry, linear geometry, was organized thinking. In geometry, you have to prove theorems. You have to prove ideas. You're given a set of facts, and you have to prove a result. And sometimes it takes 40 steps to prove it. Sometimes it takes 100 steps. And you can't skip a step. So you have to say 2 plus 2 equals 4. Then 4 minus this equals that. Then the degree of an angle. All kinds of different factors until you get to the conclusion, and you give it to a teacher who rips it apart and says, how'd you get from step 4 to 5? You missed 3 steps. And you learn the process that you cannot miss a step. You know?
Listen,
now, Fruma Jews have an example for this. An example for Fruma Jews would be... Look at Frum Jews. Frum Jews have an example. By a Seder. Skip one step of the Seder and they'll go crazy. Now, they have no idea why. They do it just by rote. But the point is meticulousness. Programmers know this. Mathematicians know it. Doctors know it. Surgery. Imagine a surgeon forgets a step and goes steps 2 before step 1. What can happen? In thinking is an organized process. And honestly, I say this with all respect. I think you all guys, you're all smart. You wouldn't be sitting here learning this stuff. I think the biggest thing I would say is nothing to do with Chassidus. But the issue is not that you don't get Chassidus. You do get Chassidus. You don't. But you have a far worse problem, which is not the Chassidus, or maybe far less problem. It's methodical thinking. That's what it is. Methodical thinking.
The question should we
and A before.
to that point and
No, we're doing it as we learn.
That's what happens. Listen, it's
No, but it's good we're having a conversation like this because most people don't have methodical thinking. That's why I'm asking you, when you go and start bringing other things, my challenge to you is not, I have no problem talking about other places. But first let's get what we're learning here.
okay. I agree.
And then you know what? You know something? If you go back, he spoke about Kalim and about Eris. Even in Ayin Beis, I'm not talking about other Maimonim. He spoke about Me'isavas Er Nasa Keli. From the thickness of the energy comes a container. But if you don't know what the energy is, you're going to talk about the thickness of the energy. You all went to school. You know that a good teacher did not teach you step 50 before he taught you step 1. You know? So someone will say, here, we're going to teach you how blood flows through your circulatory system. You have veins, you have arteries, you have capillaries, a bunch of pipes. You have a heart that pumps blood. You start learning, okay, here's how blood pumps. Fascinating. You master it. Then we'll tell you, you know something. This blood that pumps through the veins also carries something that's not just blood. It also carries oxygen. It carries other factors. If someone began and start talking about what it carries before talking about how the blood pumps properly, you're not going to get this and you're not going to get that. So, you know, now again, no problem. There's places here, as I said. My suggestion would be is, let's master something as best as we can. Then go back and say, okay, what else does the Kav carry? If you jump the gun and try to get there, I think you're going to compromise what's going on here.
Okay.
And I have no problem. We can go about this again and again and again.
Okay. Agreed.
Like, for example, a professor like yourself, I'll tell you, if you ask me on a personal coaching level, what I would tell you, I think you get it instinctively. I think you have the chush, like you get the ideas. I don't think you can articulate them, which tells me, not that you're not a good articulator, that you're like almost a selfish thinker. What do I mean by that? I don't mean in a bad way. It means that you absorb well, you get it in you, and that's all you need. You're not forced to teach it, you're not forced to communicate it. So therefore, you have a limited element of getting. You're going to get it as best as you can. If you had to present it to a class or to others, you'd get it far better. But you don't have the patience for that. And I'm not criticizing you. I'm just telling you, if I had to grade you, that's what I would say. I think you get it very well. And I think it resonates. And when you ask questions, I don't think you're asking questions because you don't get it. I think you're asking questions because you want to see how, make sure the whole thing is resonating for you. But what you're lacking is ultimately the thing that gave me most knowledge is students. The need to explain it forced me to go and start looking for what does it really mean, not just spiritually or philosophically and so on. But what I'm saying to you, there's no names here, so no one knows what I'm saying.
Knowledge,
what I'm saying to you is taken in the right spirit.
Place,
Huh? No,
I can't give a Shabbos.
So the question is why? Why shouldn't you when you do get it? Why?
I'm plenty ready to talk about the potty.
Listen, you have a challenge. Those are your students. This is developed. You want to conquer billions of people. Can you imagine what kind of problems you're going to encounter?
No, that's why it's far easier for me to speak to people who don't know what Kav means. Because we begin the way saying it the right way in the first place. I wouldn't even use those words. If I was teaching this properly to the outside, I would not use any of these words.
Energy, flow.
No, I'd use words that people would ask. The words I would use that people who know Chassidus would ask me, where'd you get this from? That's how disturbing it is. That people ask me sometimes, I write an article, these ideas without using one word, a Torah Meaningful Life. I have a whole chapter called God. All this is taken from Ayin Beis and Chassidus. I never use one word, Mamala Seif. There's no word like that in my book. Not one Hebrew word. The only word maybe I use, and not even, I'm thinking, what did I use? Not one word, no. And people ask me, where did I get this from? Did I create this on my own? Because it's resonating with people. And to me, that shows, and they've learned Chassidus. Not they didn't learn. Because they don't learn it in that way. They don't learn it in a way that you can actually communicate it to someone. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. So when are we having the Farbrengen? Tomorrow night?
We just had it.
No, I mean the big one, the big bang.
I really think everybody could be trained to do it. I think you guys could absolutely. You come every day. You're committed. That's the biggest thing. Commitment is more important than everything.
Yeah, but as soon as you hit the road and you meet the challenges,
I also have my challenges. Do you think I have no challenges? What do you think?
maybe you're a little bit above you.
No, that's not true. I have challenges. Yes, yesterday you don't know what kind of hectic what was going on here. The sound went off. We had to change. Everything was delayed. There were hundreds of shluchim waiting. You should see the emails I got. But I'm very good under pressure. I like, yeah. When there's pressure, I calm down, I smile, and I announced to everybody, Halomas of Stadium, all the blockages, Achsidis are still with us in technology today. So I turned it into a humorous...
Short example that with the BBC.
No, BBC, it happened. What could you do? Things happen. But it's a story with the potty, as you said, with the pot, with the pail. Yeah. Everything, you gotta... Trust me, of course you get disturbed. The point I'm making here is that absolutely can be trained, but you should force yourself to teach it to others, to speak to someone else. Even not teach it. Forget about teaching Ayin Beis. To take a lesson from this and bring it into a person's life. Give someone advice based on this. That's where I would begin. To teach a whole thing is much more complicated. But give advice. Like I just said, the kav. Mastering the kav is mastering the process of anything coming from one place, from a complete, almost ayin to yesh. I think that's a pretty cool thing to master, because we're all busy with processes. Like right here, the kav that we're talking here, the kavim that we're discussing are pretty messed up kavim. They're not flowing. They're making a lot of long stops and staying in places for a long time, more than this. So what do? We continue? We don't continue? I don't even know what to do. Or is this over? Was this an overdose?
No, I have to leave at 11, but we must continue. I have to leave at 11.
Should I finish the chapter?
I have to leave at 11. Cannot do that. If I'm going to miss everything.
Okay, let's go like this. So let's see if Yuvin calls Al Derech Moshel. The Rebbe Rashab just heard the plea and the cry from your heart. You hear? I'm telling you, he's talking to us personally. I have no doubt that when he wrote this, he was thinking about us right here. For Yuvin calls El Derech Moshel. He says, you're having a problem? You'll understand it all with a moshel I'm going to give you now. Personalize it, my friends. You're able to do that?
Yeah.
He's going to give us a moshel. Benefesh ha'adam. Since this is so amorphous, let's talk Benefesh ha'adam. You ready for the moshel?
Yeah.
Hari hakeich, Yuvin calls El Derech Moshel Benefesh ha'adam. Hari hakeich is hem begedarim miyuchadim. Umucholokim zeh mizeh. Everyone understands what that means. The faculties are in specific and distinct and distinguishable entities, parameters that are separate from one another. That's right. The koyach ha-chochmeh hu begeder miyuchad, the koyach ha-bina begeder miyuchad. Chochmeh has a particular geder, a particular parameter and structure, and koyach ha-bina is a geder miyuchad. The koyach ha-chesed, and the same thing koyach of love. That right? Everybody gets that?
Yeah.
Specific boundaries and parameters. And even though they're not tangible, they're spiritual keiches, they are sublime faculties. Nevertheless, they are begdarim in particular parameters and structures and defined. So here we have the keiches. If someone says, tell me the difference between love and hate, between love and discipline, between conceiving an idea and comprehending an idea. If someone said to you, tell me the difference between water and fire, it'd be very easy for you to say. Because you know it so tangibly. Water makes things wet, fire dries things up. Fire burns, water can cool. Fire, etc., etc. Chachma Bina, I have to think a little. You know why? Because you don't have it in front of you. We're Gushim Dika people. So you see right here, something that has a gedder, but it's not tangible. Right here, you're starting to get a sense of what a nakuda is, what pshittus is, because it's keiches. That's clearly bina is not chachma. Vision is not hearing, but it's also not tangible in the technical sense. So even though they're nafshim, they're sublime, nevertheless they're gedarim yuchadin. V'hine hanefeshu etzem echad ruchni poshet amufshet megedet sir ugedet hakbala. Do you see how the Rebbe Rashab Mamish is addressing the dilemma here? Mm-hmm. And the nefesh, now let's talk about the nefesh itself, which is a third level. The difference between hands and legs, arms and legs, everybody can define, like fire and water. The difference between The concept of Chachma and Bina, a little more hard. But they all rooted in a place that's completely doesn't even have the Geder Ruchni. So here we have Geder Gashmi, physical parameters. We have now spiritual parameters, and now something with no parameters. What is that? The nefesh now, and now the nefesh is etzem echad. It's one core essence, ruchni poshet. It's spiritual and sublime, without shape and form. Someone say, what does a nefesh look like? Chachma bina, you can't define what it physically looks like, but you can say chachma is a concept. Bina is comprehension. Chesed is giving. Gvura is withdrawing. Chesed is attraction. Gvura is repulsion. But the nefesh moves pasha to move megeder sir v'geder agbala. It's shapeless and seamless from any type of sir, any shape, form, or structure, or parameter. Ve'echiyu ma nefesh keiches mugdarim u'mugbalim. So how is the question can come from a sublime, shapeless entity? Keiches, faculties that are mugdar u'mugbal, that are defined and limited and confined. Because even if it's only not the nefesh itself, not the soul itself, but even the reflection of the soul is also amorphous and shapeless, just like the soul is. So how do you get out of this defined and limited parametered faculties? And nevertheless, we see the nefesh works through its faculties. It's not the faculties, they're not on their own. They're faculties that the nefesh is working through. Through vision, through chachma, the nefesh expresses itself. The nefesh experiences things. Through love, it feels, it receives, it gives. The soul, it becomes mischakim, how do you say mischakim? Conceives, becomes wise, understands things through Keich Chachma. And it becomes loving through giving love. The soul itself is being enriched and experiencing these faculties, through these faculties. So how does this work? We have here an amorphous, shapeless soul, shaped faculties. How does it travel? So he says, Ayin, however, the Inyan is like he says in Tanya chapter 51, that 613 type of faculties are included, encompassed, and contained in the nefesh. Even though the soul is etzem echad poshet, is one core, essential, shapeless entity, nimtsoyim klulim by tarya keiches shem keidia keiches aglim. Nevertheless, nimtsoyim, it's found and contained within it 613 faculties. They are the roots, the sources of the revealed faculties. So you now revealed a new level. If that's the case, the faculties that are encompassed in the nefesh, they're like memutzayim, they're interfaces, intermediaries between the shapeless soul, core soul, and the revealed faculties. So it's not just a jumping from a shapeless source or reflection of the source, that you have to say, like he says in Tanya, that in the source, in some way or form, which we may not fully understand, is encompassed core faculties. So now we have arms and legs, we have faculties that are revealed, the more sublime, we have faculties as they are rooted in the soul, but they're on a soul level, but their faculties rooted there.
You jump from 613 to 10.
It doesn't say 10. I said 10.
Yeah, but there are 10.
Well, the Tanya says Tayag mine keiches klulim benefesh, because 10 breaks into many details. And being that they're an interface, you have to say they have two levels in them. And that is the way it compares to the nefesh, the source, how they look upward to the source, and how they look downward, compared and in comparison to the revealed faculties. Like in every mamutza, in every interface, every translator has to look at the person who's speaking one language, then turns to the other person and translates. He then listens to him and turns back So this state has both elements compared to both the different levels that it's connecting. The way these inner core faculties, the way they are compared to the core soul, they're mishtav milov, they have a similarity, commonality. Shem b'chinas pshitus mamish, be'erech pshitus etzem hanefesh. That they are completely shapeless, commensurate to the shapelessness of the soul itself. Because they have that part of the soul, its shapelessness. But then they have something different. Because their interface, they have one step below. They move one step down. And the way they are compared to the faculties, the revealed faculties, they're pshittus, they're also shapeless. But shapeless only compared to the faculties. The Gam Sham, they're still shapeless. But there, is only a pshittus, meaning that they're only removed and negate, they're shapeless relative to the tangible faculty of sight or sound or chachma or bina or chesed. But you can't call them totally shapeless. So you have a level that's shapeless and not shapeless. Compared to the soul, it's shapeless because it's like the soul. But compared to the faculties that will emerge from it. In other words, the soul has in it another level, basically, that is an interface, and it has both elements, shapelessness, and it's somewhat commensurate to the actual faculties, though it's not shaped like them. It's not defined in a tangible way like that.
He's talking about Oren Keli. It's just an example of Oren Keli.
You're bringing again something else? I'm saying, he doesn't use that. Of course it's an example for Oren Keli. But what's the Oren, what's the Keli? Tell me. What's the Oren, what's the Keli?
The pshitus of Or is the soul.
Which is the Keli? Tell me.
The Keli is the goof.
But he's not talking about the goof. He's talking about the faculties. So you see, as soon as you bring Keli in, you're going to be confused. Where does the Keli belong here? Which is the Keli? Tell me. You could say the faculties are the Keli. He did say that too, by the way. But I have no problem you bringing something in. But you see right away, you can't just bring words. Huh?
It seemed like the identical words, almost like,
Okay, so you have to distinguish, are they identical or not? And I ask you, which is the containers? Right now, the containers would be most practical to say it's the body, and I wouldn't go there. This is levels in Oyer, for practical purposes. This is Eres Gluyim, Eres Atzmim, and the Etzem itself. Okay, let's go on. The Gam Shem Yes, we did learn these things. Like Koyach HaMaskel, the power to conceive ideas. It's mushal. It negates it. Mushal.
Removed.
It's removed from and it negates the metzius of seichel. It's the power to conceive of ideas. It's not the ideas themselves. Nevertheless, it's still seichel. It's still seichel, not midas. It's not emotions. It's not love, and it's not negate. Does not negate the geder of seichel. The category of seichel does not negate the category of intelligence, even though it negates actual intelligence. But this is not the etzem. But the power of intelligence, hayuli atzmi, which we learned earlier, the one in the soul, in the shapeless soul, hayuli atzmi meaning the potential in the core, hanatua mushish benefesh, that is implanted and rooted in the soul itself, hu mushlim megeder in haseichel gamri, is negates even the geder, even the category of seichel. Even though it's called Koyach HaSeichel, that's only related to the pshittus, the pure shapelessness of the actual core soul, that completely negates all, even the category of Seichel. Even the category of the power that's beyond the category of Seichel. And that gufa is the reason. Because it's rooted in the soul, and it's in the core soul. That's the reason that this power of intelligence, the way it's encompassed in the soul, is not even the category of Hamshach Adayin. You can't call it even something that's extending in any way. And how do you it's completely shapeless. And the way it comes by that it comes in a concealed type of transmission, and when it finally does come into the Koyach HaMaskil, which is already called a hidden transmission, its pshitus is only compared to the actual revealed intelligence. So we have here 4 stages. We have the core soul. We have the faculties that are encompassed in the core soul, that are the mamutza. On one hand, they're shapeless. On the other hand, they have the beginnings of something. And relative to the faculties, the koyach hamaskil is next. That's already beginning to be expressed. And then you have the seichel. So you have seichel, koyach hamaskil, etzem koyach haseichel, hayuli in the etzem hanefesh, and etzem hanefesh.
By the way, koyach hamaskil,
like chochmas tema.
All of the other midas also have the same steps.
Yeah.
Like you would say, there's
yeah.
koyach hayuli of chesed.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between koyach hayuli of chesed and koyach hayuli?
There's no difference.
There's no difference.
That's where he says tayak keiches. There's no difference, but there is a difference also, because one will go here and one will go here. So you need an explanation. How do you explain that state? He's giving the example. We'll discuss it more. How do you explain it? But he's definitely going there. Let's continue. Zekufa sibida kecha sechel k'meishu kol benefesh einam b'chinas mishachar that's the sphere of Sagnuzis, and the example of this we'll understand above the 10 hidden spheres. How the 10 hidden spheres that are encompassed in the infinite light are pshitus mamish, are complete shapelessness before the kav. And the way they come in the kav and the line, they're also without substance. So 3 levels. Spheres agnuzis would be like the keiches that are encompassed in the core soul. The kav is also shapeless, but that's the pshitus l'gabe spheres agluyis. That's already shapeless only compared to the revealed spheres that are the revealed faculties. The revealed is when it's already manifest energies, when you see your eye, vision of your eye. Chesed is being expressed and experienced.
What's that? So this is koyach hamaskil?
Koyach hamaskil is the kav.
The kav, yeah.
So we understand from this that even though the mitzias of Eris, its substance comes through the container, through their manifestation, and they're being contained and grasped by the containers, they become like the personality of the containers. Nevertheless, the energies are also in a form of Esesphiris. So it has both sides. And they have fundamental core in their core, inherent. Yes, they have a distinction of higher and lower, of levels, a hierarchy. And that's why they're able to come into the containers. If they didn't have that, they wouldn't be able to come into the containers. And the end of their flow, which we learned earlier, like I said, the end of the flow, when they're ready to hit the paper with letters, that's when it reveals the actual substance and the distinction that they have inherently. Like we said before, inherently it begins because that's what God wants. And through the containers, they become like the personality of the containers to impact, to affect, as according to the container. So now comes the second Gilui. This is all Eir HaGvul. However, the Amshach transmission that's in the form of Ein Sof, infinite, that's what comes, just a revelation of the core, of the source. Its role is not to do anything. It's not to accomplish anything. Not like the Pulas Eir Vagili, that a revelation that has a point, a revelation to express something. All it is expression of the core. Levada, only. And it's like the core.
So till now we spoke about Eir Gvul?
Yes. See, even in the highest levels of Eir Gvul, meaning the Keiches Hayulim, Atzmim, in the core, they have a purpose. That's before the Kaviv. That's Esesur Sagnuzis. So in other words, even the core, why are they there? Why does the soul have even its core force faculties, even though they're completely shapeless? Because you want them to come out. Here too, because the divine desire wants a structure, so you have an Esesur Sagnuzis. In the Kav, it becomes more revealed, and then till it comes into containers. Now we're talking something doesn't have this intention at all. It's just gilim in etzem. It's just revealing the core. That's all it is. It's not about shaping anything.
It carries only the
be'emes ein shayach was a shum shem klal rak shem ein seif. In truth, you cannot say any name. You can't attribute any name. Only ein seif. And when it comes into a revelation of the worlds, that energy, meaning when that core energy comes and extends into the existence, how do you nikra b'shem ratzon? Then we call it desire, as we learned before. Shugilia atzmus, which is a revelation of the atzmus, what God wants. But saying that He wants is already a step, another step. What it is, all it is whatever atzmus.
Right. Well,
it's a reflection of Atzmus.
Way before Ratzon, usually for Ratzon when He wills.
So there's a desire for the desire. Yeah. Well, Commission is Barleil Pedic Memtes, as we learned earlier, chapter 49. That the power of desire is different than all, distinguished from all the faculties. They're actual mitzias.
That's really cool.
The faculties are actual mitzias. Each one has a role. The power of intelligence is a distinct power that's outside of the core soul. The power of desire, on the other hand, doesn't have, what is it? Without the core. It's all it is. What does the soul want? It doesn't have a substance in saying it's seichel, chesed, love, or anything like that. Its whole inyan is only the leaning of the inclination and the drawing down, the extension of the drawing out of the soul. That's why in all faculties something remains when the faculty is gone. Even after you stop thinking, you're an askola, an idea. Someone shut the light? Yeah, he did.
Okay, let's go, guys.
The light, you shut the light by mistake. Like the intelligence that remains even after you're stopping of conceiving or intellectualizing. Nothing remains after desire. When you desire, afterwards, effect of the desire to do something remains, but not the desire itself. Like we learned earlier, he's talking about chapter 49. That's why the revelation of the infinite light that has no name and no description, all it is the revelation of the core, when it's nimshach and drawn into the worlds, it's called desire. Being. So it has a name now, but it's a name only to say because it's not because it's a substance, but it's saying that it's the end of the. So you say all it is desire. You give it a name. What does it mean? It's a desire, not as a desire of its own, only to reveal the core, the essence. And it surrounds, encompasses them all equally. And this energy, being that it's only a revelation of the core, it's possible even if there were no worlds. Because all it is revelation of the core. Not that God would need it, but it's possible. The other air would not be possible. The finite air energy would not be possible if there were no worlds. You wouldn't need it, and there's no. It would completely. It would not be possible. Why would? What's the role of it? But this, you could say the role is revealing the core. Why it's revealing the core, we need an explanation.
Who,
Right. But you understand its role there. Unless there's a structure, there's no purpose for, absolutely no need for, and no, not shaykh, the concept of it.
This clears a little bit.
So let me read the Kitzur. From here we'll have to understand the three crowns. Teira, priesthood, and Malchus, kingship. As we explained that in general there are two types of transmissions of energies. One is midavugvul, a defined and a limited one. That's the kav. That's the line. That is measured according to the worlds in existence. And this measurement is in its root in the infinite light that envisioned, that estimated within himself to radiate in this type of parameters. These are the 10 hidden spheres, and they're completely shapeless. And through the tzimtzum, the concealment, to become separate and distinct spheres, that's when the knimshach hakav, through the tzimtzum came the kav, in a form of nekudas, points. So in order to bring them into distinct spheres. But they're in a state of blima, substanceless. Not like the points in Toyu, in the world of chaos, that manifest in containers. And the intention is that they should be mitzias. Here, it's simply the process of the flow that they start out as being very shapeless, like their source. In Toyu, there's a particular purpose there. For example, the faculties that are encompassed in the core soul, they're shapeless like the shapelessness of the soul. And the hidden transmission, they're shapeless, but only relative to the revealed faculties. That's the kav. And the end of their flow and their transmission, they go into they come meaning as it enters into containers, they become actual substance. And this transmission is because there's a desire for the world. The second transmission is the form of Ein Sof it's only to reveal the core essence, like the desire that's to reveal the core soul. So this is a summary of chapters that we learned already, especially chapters 31, like he said, 49, and later where he talks about the Hamshach and Alemes. He's just tying it all together, that we have the three levels of the Esesvis Sagnuzis, we have the Kav, and we have the Eris and Kalim, and then finally there's the other Hamshach, the Hamshach of Ratzon, which is higher than all these. So we'll stop here. We finished chapter 127. We did 246 and page 246, 247.